you know, most consumers are new to dragon fruit. And so you have to, most people go and they go, what is that? Oh, that's dragon fruit. Oh, I've now heard of it. If you said that in 2018, people hadn't even heard of dragon fruit. So now people are at least aware. I think the awareness has come from Starbucks, honestly. Starbucks has had since 2018, 2 drinks on their menu that are dragon fruit drinks. And so that basically introduced people to dragon fruit. And now you start to see it more in the market. The second thing that made people more aware is a lot of fruit started coming up. There's 7 countries that can import, I think 7, into the United States. And it started coming up from Central America into the United States. Pitaya Plus is a frozen, what do you call it, quick freeze fruit that has come into places like Costco. So by actually having the fruit, the awareness has been there. As a production grower, what we worry about are what your fruit looks like when it gets into the market. So probably the best advice that was given to me when I bought the ranch was somebody said, NEVA, fruit rots. Always know where your fruit is going. So this fruit does rot. It can have a good shelf life. However, you have a skin life issue. And each variety is different. So when we go into production, what we would like to see, most people who are dragon fruit aficionados, they say, oh, I want a big fruit. Okay. That's very common.
Yeah.
If somebody's never bought a dragon fruit, a big organic dragon fruit could be $20 in the market.
Yep.
So, you know, oh, is that what somebody, their first try at a dragon fruit, is that what they're going to want to pay? So we actually had pushback from big fruit, that 3/4 pound acceptable, but getting the big fruits may not be until somebody, you know, frequented that market and really understood that that's the fruit that they wanted to buy. Yeah. So that's different. So a local customer might want to buy big fruit, whereas a market customer might want to just try an average size fruit.
Because it's smaller at lower cost.
At a lower cost. The one thing that we get all the time, which I'm sure you guys have heard, is most people's first try of fruit is typically a white dragon fruit, which typically will be a Vietnamese giant dragon fruit.
Kind of bland.
Typically is bland.
Yep.
And
harvested early and imported usually.
And imported. I think their transportation time, because they are by ship, their transportation time from Vietnam, I think, is 12 days. So whatever from harvest to clean to box to boat to transport to them market, right? So that's a lot in there.
It's like at least 2 weeks and being efficient and fast, in my opinion.
2 weeks, and then radiation takes the rest of it. They was left on it.
Yeah. So, and that's right. So Vietnam has to gas their fruit. That's the only way that they're accepted into the United States. And so that's another element of the fruit that is imported. And so that was one of the reasons why Julio and the old owner had grown organically and we certified organic, was we felt that we have a really positive story to tell, that we go to market with a very natural product.
It's an advantage.
And it is an advantage. So the other part with the fruit, is your skin. And so this is where we've had a lot of debate, is a variety such as Axe is never really turns pink. So it's green and it turns kind of a yellowy, a little brown when it's really ripe. And so that might not look pleasant to the consumer in the marketplace.
So they were looking for bright colors, salmon colored, red.
Where those Thai whites, they look really good, but they don't taste that good.
Right. So we have the other thing too is, because the marketplace hasn't really settled, you will see signs that say white, red dragon fruit, yellow dragon fruit. But the red dragon fruit is referring to the skin, and yet it's white inside. And so the marketplace has kind of messed that up. So
they're really confused now, the consumers.
And the marketplace has confused the consumer. So when we see it, we try to have our wholesaler unconfuse the market to make sure that they're saying it right. So red flesh, white flesh is the first break in what's supposed to happen in the marketplace. Because you can't necessarily determine, if we had a whole field of physical graffiti, we could send to the marketplace physical graffiti and call it that, but it's just not a perfect world with dragon fruit. Mm-hmm. And so when we go to market, we may send 100 cases of 50 of those might be physical graffiti, 25 might be robless. And we found that it was too hard to try to get a variety into the market because it would be a 1 week shot, and you never know how many pounds that's going to be. So we go to marketplace still with what we call magenta flesh. Mm-hmm. And so that's now going back to the big 5.
So now you're going white, red, magenta?
So white, red, magenta.
Perfect. I think that's good.
How we determine magenta is the most flavorful fruit. So we call it California magenta, and that is something that is going to be full-bodied fruit effect. So a lot of people who don't know dragon fruit, I compare it with apples. And so this is really easy if anybody's talking to somebody that doesn't know. So, okay, do you know apples? Do you know the gala apple? So the gala apple is a very inexpensive apple. It's pretty. Yeah. It's a pretty apple. When you bite into it, it's just pretty bland. So I consider the gala apple and Vietnamese white the similar. So that is the similar.
That's a good analogy.
Then I have the pink lady apple or the Honeycrisp apple. They're big, they're full bodied. You bite into it, you get a lot of flavor burst. Sweet tart, right? So this whole thing going on.
Layers of complexity. And
that's it. Yeah. And so that's exactly what a California magenta fruit would taste like. And so with that, American Beauty we found had that, Purple Haze has that, Dark Star has that, Physical Graffiti has that, and Robles has that. An interesting thing that we had with Robles, it's not in my first season, it was an okay flavor profile. I would say a 7.5. And this year, our flavor profile, last year I said, geez, Robles are tasting better. And this year I said, Robles tastes almost better than American Beauty, which, trust me, I'm American Beauty girl. And so I was like, what? And we just found from maturity, cross-pollinating, fertilizer, water, everything, that Robles flavor profile has enhanced. I would give it an 8.5 plus. And so you can actually change flavor profiles through cross-pollination. When we just picked Vietnamese giant, and they were smaller. I don't know what they were pollinated with, but they were tangy. They actually had flavor.
They were pollinated with Robles.
So by cross-pollinating, we actually changed the flavor profile of a very bland
Not so much
fruit.
The color, but the flavor, right?
But the flavor. Yeah. So I just literally cut into one because I wanted to see if it was bland, and I was like, whoa, this actually had some flavor. It's not, it's nothing.
So do you think using like a Robles red, a complex pollen, the pollen of a complex fruit is going to improve maybe a more bland variety? Is that kind of what you guys are thinking?
I can say in my experience, and I think Julio will back me up on this, in my experience, we have changed flavor profile, and it's because of pollen.
That's amazing. So that's a really important factor.
And I eat the fruit all the time. All the time. I mean, I'm trying it all the time, and I 3.5 years, and I would say like, wait, that doesn't taste like what it's supposed to. And so that's when you go back, or you could cut open a fruit that typically was less seed dense, and it literally looks like a Robles, which is a higher seed density fruit, and it looks like a Robles inside. And you're like, whoa, that was pollinated with a Robles.
Because it had Robles pollen, so it took some of the traits. So, interesting. That's really interesting.
And I think when my first Pizza Haya Festival, I asked a question because they were talking about cross-pollinating. And so I said, does it change the fruit? And they said, no, it just takes the best traits and it can enhance that. And that was the answer. And it was kind of a weird answer. And then what we found is it's actually a true answer, is that truly traits start to morph into the fruit, and it can actually change shape of the fruit. Like we can have a physical graffiti start to look kind of like an American Beauty. So a physical graffiti is oval, right? And American Beauty is round. So if you sliced either of those, you got oval, round. I mean, there's a very clear distinction. Well, you start to see a physical graffiti round up.
I mean, like an oblong? Does it go kind of halfway in between, or does it really take on the pollen trait?
It really starts to round up.
That's crazy. That's so interesting.
Yeah. And so when you deal, that's the one thing, when you deal with 5,500 plants and fruit all the time, our production on fruit is, we just say 20,000 pounds. And so you're touching this fruit all the time. You start to see these things happen, and you're like, But this year, 100% that our Robles took on really American Beauty flavor.
Wow.
Because that's what it was pollinated with. So, yeah.
That's really interesting. I mean, that makes me think a lot about what you can, if you want to have a better fruit and you have lots of varieties, you can tap into different flavors.
Yeah.
Or what if you took the same plant and use 5 different pollen sources and analyze those fruits and see the differences?
Yeah, yeah. So I think what we found is maybe we've hit our sweet spot where we stride mostly with those 5, and they're all delicious flavors, so they could bring a delicious trait to the other. And so by just really focusing on the 5, we have that. We still will bring in, Orejona has saved us, as I mentioned. Lisa has saved us for pollen. They're very high pollen producers. So when you really need pollen, that can help. We don't take pollen from Axe anymore.
No.
It was too wet, and it just didn't.
It doesn't seem to have a lot. No. There's not much in there.
Yeah, you would think it should, but it just, so we don't take anything from Axe anymore. So really our pollen is coming from the 5 with some whites, sugar dragon, and if we're in a jam, a Lisa or a Orejona. So, yeah. So those are the 5 we go to market with, and we just feel that the customer, if they got that home, they would be really happy with the flavor profile, and they would say, wow, that was good. And they might not become a dragon fruit fan. Like Dickie is a watermelon fan, and he goes, well, it doesn't taste like watermelon. I said, well, that's because it's dragon fruit. Right? So, but I can't get it. He only likes watermelon. So, but as long as somebody says, yeah, that had a good flavor. And we had a person's husband who had tried white and was not a fan. She said, please just try NEVA's fruit. And he was like, yeah, that is good. And so he's not, #1 dragon fruit fan, but he was able to know that there is a flavorful dragon fruit out there that is
representation, because so many people will spend $7 on a pretty fruit at the store, cut it open, and be like, wow, that was gross.
It's
bland. What happened to the,
I
thought they were good.
Yeah. And so it's disappointing. And you also, one of the things we talked about was if you have, if you are a backyard grower and you have a choice of what plant, it's the same thing. I remember reading somebody's on Facebook on one of the sites, and they said, oh, I got my first fruit. It tasted horrible. But it was some fruit, some variety that everybody was touting because it was very unique. But they weren't touting it from the flavor profile. They were touting it from
the flower, maybe.
The uniqueness. And so this poor person had waited for, 3 or 4 years and then got the first fruit, and it was horrible, and I felt really bad. So I always tell people, if you're going to do fruits, go with high producers, go with flavor profiles, because if you're growing for fruit, then be happy with the fruit. If after you get those going, then go into more unique varieties if you want to get into specialty.